Alright, welcome back to the channel, guys. Appreciate you guys checking back in. Today I'm going to give you guys my thoughts on the Manix 2 lightweight in Rex 45. So initially when I heard that Spyderco was doing all these sprint runs in Rex 45 at the beginning of the year, I was really excited about it. I had previously watched, before the announcement, several cut tests on the edge retention of Rex 45, and I watched Big Brown Bear's comparison test between Rex 45 and M4, showing the strength at the edge that Rex 45 can offer over M4. And that's a really good test. If you guys haven't seen that video, check out Big Brown Bear's channel. It's a really good video. So I had, learned a good bit about the steel prior to the announcement that they made, and given that the Manix 2 lightweight has been one of my favorite models for a few years now, I was really excited about this one most of all, but some of the other models as well. So when these started dropping at dealers, I picked one up from a not so well-known dealer, I guess you could say, and I got it in. I pulled it out of the box, started looking it over. Everything looked really good. The factory edge was well done. The primary grind looked very well done. The plunge grind was nice and square. The satin finish on the blade was well done. Everything looked really great. And then I went to close it, and when I pulled the lock back to disengage it, it made this loud popping sound, like the cage ball bearing was getting stuck in that little slot. And I kept thinking it would go away. I tried to adjust the pivot. I couldn't even sling the blade closed. It was so tight, and even with the pivot adjustments, it didn't make a difference. I opened it a bunch of times and closed it, and the popping sound never went away. So after about a week of doing that, I ended up sending it back. And then pretty much right as I did that, Spyderco, they showed up on Spyderco's website. So I went ahead and ordered one directly from Spyderco. And I specifically requested one with a smooth action, with a crisp plunge grind, and with a good, consistent, even factory bevel from side to side. And they pretty much delivered on that. This is, I would say, very close to a perfect example. The action, as you can see, is really good. It drops shut. No issues there. The lockup is rock solid. The centering is about as perfect as you can get. The plunge grind is nice and square. Pretty much a 90-degree transition in there. And the factory edge, it's not perfect, but it's not bad. It's kind of gouged out a little bit on this side from about the middle of the blade up. And I've seen pictures of other ones that are like that as well. But, this side looks really good. That side, just for whatever reason, I don't know if they're slightly bent that direction, and with their little robot sharpening it, maybe it was leaning that way a little bit. I'm not sure why that seems to be a trend among the lightweight Rex 45s, but I have seen several of them like this. But I'm going to sharpen this, so not a huge deal to me. I will fix it when the time comes. So other than that little minor thing, everything else on this pretty much looks flawless. Now, the burnt orange FRCP is kind of ugly, if I'm honest. I don't really like this color. I definitely enjoy the safety orange color, like of this Ritter here, but the burnt orange I'm just not a fan of it. I really like the steel. I've been enjoying using it on this model and a couple others, but I definitely am not a fan of this burnt orange. So that is what it is. This is just kind of a work knife for me, and I've gotten used to it. So that's just something that I overlook. So let's get into this thing a little bit. The Manix 2 lightweight is 8 inches in overall length. You're looking at essentially a 3.5 inch blade, 4.5 inch handle, 1/8 of an inch blade stock thickness. They normally run about 20 thousandths behind the edge, right here at the plunge grind, and then between 25 and 30 up towards the tip. So pretty much everyone that you see will have a thinner edge bevel down here at the plunge grind, and it'll gradually get thicker up towards the tip, and that's pretty natural. It's just a little extreme on this one for whatever reason. So 2.9 ounce weight FRCP scales, which is fiberglass reinforced copolymer, essentially a fancy name for glass filled plastic. Pinned together construction cage ball bearing lock, Spyderco's wire pocket clip, nice lanyard hole, bidirectional texturing on the scales, and the Rex 45 blade steel with a beautiful satin finish. Now, pretty much everything is flawless on this knife besides that. I don't see any other issues. It's just a standard Manix 2. Everything's done really, really well, but it's nothing that's, you know, mind-blowing or anything to make a huge note about, like on the Sage 1 and Maximum. The fit and finish on that was fantastic. This is just your average working man's knife that's, everything's done really well, and it just works. There's a couple size comparisons for you guys. You can see it's about the exact same size as the Ritter Hogue. Good bit larger than a Para 3. Move that one out of the way. Do one more. The Benchmade bug out. Kind of dwarfs the bug out. The bug out's about half an inch shorter, but you can see this knife is a lot wider and definitely in the closed position. It's 1.75 inches tall, so it's going to feel a lot larger in your pocket. Even though it's super lightweight, you're not going to feel it in terms of the weight. When you stick your hand in your pocket, you'll definitely feel, you know, the back of your hand rubbing up against the edge of the knife, whereas with something like the bug out, you might not feel it. So another thing, if we look at the blades on these, now let's do it like this. The bug out, even though it's a half inch shorter overall, if we line up edge to edge, you actually get more cutting edge out of this shorter knife than you do on the Manix. And that's kind of just the nature of the 50-50 forward finger choil. And that's just something, you know, for a preference, depending on whether you care more about the length of your cutting edge, or if you like the control and finesse detailed cutting that a forward finger choil offers you with that control over the blade. I like both. You know, I can see justifications for both, and I own knives with both, and I don't really think I prefer one over the other. I like them both for different reasons. So, like I said, this knife, or this particular model, the Manix 2 Lightweight, has been in my collection longer than pretty much any other higher end knife. Any knife over $100, I think I've had some version of the Manix 2 longer than anything else. And I just really enjoy carrying it and using it, because with the cage ball bearing lock, I love how solid the lock feels and sounds. I've never had one of these, even though I've owned 4 or 5, never had any with any kind of blade play, and just the sounds that it makes, the way it sucks, the detent sucks that blade into place, and the way it pops out and the sounds it makes when it opens, just gives you an air of confidence about the locking mechanism. And just the way it's designed in general, I feel like it's a lot stronger than something like Benchmade's Axis Lock. You've got a coil spring instead of an Omega spring. You've got a hardened round steel ball for the lockup, so it's kind of rolling across the tang of the blade, rolling into place, locking it up. So it's creating less wear on the internals as you're using it, and I just feel like it's going to last longer than some other locking mechanisms. And then it's just really, really solid. So I definitely appreciate that about it. Got this nice leaf-shaped sort of spear point style blade with a nice acute tip, full flat grind. Pretty good geometry for a working knife. this thing slices pretty well, even though it's not super thin. It doesn't have a super thin edge bevel or anything like that, but it still performs really well for cutting tasks. So I can definitely appreciate that with that nice slight little bit of belly throughout the blade. Nice comfortable ramp with some good jimping on the spine. A little bit more crudely done than the Taichung models are, but it definitely works well, even though, you know, it can feel a bit uncomfortable if you're putting a lot of tension or pressure on your fingers with the knife. But nothing to really complain about, just not as well executed as some of the Taichung models. Nice large hole that you got good access to on both sides of the blade. You can spotty flick it. You can flick it out with your thumb. You can slow roll it out if you want to, or you can just use the locking mechanism, pull it back and sling the blade out. So I really like this knife as just an everyday worker user. It's good to carry for working. It's good to carry in lightweight shorts, taking them to the beach, doing whatever. It's just a good all-around, anytime carry working man's knife. Now, this is not like a super hard use construction style knife. You know, I wouldn't be using this to pry open any paint cans or anything like that, especially with this blade steel, because it does have a pretty fine, acute tip on it compared to some other knives. I would feel, well, I don't know. It almost looks like it's got a thicker tip than the Hogue here does. So maybe it's worthy of prying just as much, but it is a bit finer or more acute than the Hogue, so I would definitely be careful with it. I definitely wouldn't try to pry a paint can open with it or nothing like that. But yeah, definitely just a good all-around user, no matter what the situation is, in my opinion. And so I've had this thing for, I guess, about 3 months at this point. I've put it through a lot of use. I carry it usually about 3 to 4 times a week, I would say. I've broken down dozens of boxes with it, cut a couple dozen zip ties with it, some rope, probably over 100 plastic style packages at this point, some pallet strapping. Actually deburred about 30 copper blocks with this at work a couple weeks ago, and the edges held up really well even through all that use. It finally stopped shaving hair about 3 weeks ago. I stropped it back with a 4 micron strop on basswood, and it brought it back to shaving sharp. Then I deburred all that copper block, and it kind of lost its shaving sharpness again. But I'll let you guys see if I can find a good sheet of paper. Well, you'd think I'd be prepared for this, huh? Well, here's an envelope. So sort of like a piece of paper. Give you guys a little demonstration of how well it's held up after that much use. So keep in mind everything I said, all the stuff that I've cut with this, and I've stropped it one time. So the steel, it really lives up to its hype. I mean, it's a really fantastic steel. And what really impresses me about it is, you know, this is the factory edge. I haven't sharpened this, and it's just held up through all that use, through everything I've done with it. And steel is really very sharp. Doesn't shave hair anymore, but that's still a very sharp knife for everything that I've done with it. And that's something you don't always see with factory edges. A lot of times factory edges tend to dull pretty quickly due to being burnt or fatigued. But with Rex 45, you know, maybe the fact that it's got all that cobalt in it, it offers a very high hardness and a high red hot hardness, which essentially means that you can heat the steel up to a very high temperature and it'll maintain its hardness as long as it's properly heat treated. Over a steel like, say, 20 CV, if you heat it up too hot, it's gonna start to soften the steel above a certain temperature, and this will too. It just takes a much higher temperature, you you know, depending on how it's heat treated. So maybe that has something to do with the factory edge on this holding an edge better than a lot of other factory edges will on other steels. I don't know that for sure, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. Honestly, I've owned about 4 knives, I think, with Rex 45 at this point, and I've been really impressed with the edge retention of all of them. Straight out of the gate with the factory edge, they've all been pretty fantastic. And I know they're running most of these right about 67, 66 or 67 HRC, and I've had a couple of mine tested and they were all at 67. I think I have one that was at 65.5, and I could tell the difference in the edge retention, but the edge retention on this has been so good I feel like it's at 67 even though I haven't had it tested. So the performance has just been phenomenal. The action is great. The lockup is super solid. Everything is done extremely well, except for that minor, you know, gouge at the edge on this show side. Other than that, man, this has been a fantastic knife. And it's definitely not the prettiest looking knife in the world, but, you know, I'm really not concerned about that. It's just a really good user for me, and that's all I do with it is just put it to work, and it's perfect for that. So those are my thoughts on this, guys. One day I will do a full review and breakdown of the Manix 2 Lightweight, and I'll pull out all the stops for you guys and really get into the nitty-gritty details and show you guys the locking mechanism and everything like that. But for now, those are my thoughts on this particular variant that I have. I'm really enjoying it. I highly recommend it for sure. And yeah, so that's about it, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.